Alright, so today for this video we're going to be looking at how to prepare glass in the form of glass rods here for ion exchange treatments that we'll do later. So let me just first run through some of the things that we're going to need to prep the glass. So we need the glass itself. So this is our glass rods, and when we start working with it I'll show you the dimensions. But we have glass rods. These are too long for our purposes, and so that's why we're going to need to prep this glass. So we need the glass itself. We also are going to need to score the glass. So we have these little scoring tools that have a little diamond roller on them. So that will score the surface of the glass so that we can break it along a given line where we want to break it into shorter segments. So we're going to need those scoring tools. We're also going to need markers and rulers to mark out the dimensions. We have a set of calipers here for measuring things. And safety-wise, if you're not wearing glasses, you should have your safety glasses here. Goggles would work as well. We always like to have a pair of nitrile gloves standing by for most tasks in the lab. And then for the breaking of the glass, we actually have some thicker furnace-style gloves that will protect our hands from any glass shards that might come out. And as a kind of unusual safety equipment, we have a plastic bag, and so we'll show you how this works as well, and how we're going to use this. And then, as always, if you're in the lab, we've got our kind of lab notebook for writing any measurements or conditions and various things that happen. So we've got that standing by as well. So that kind of gives you kind of the list of things that we're going to need for this portion of the lab. And then we'll come back and we'll discuss the various tasks here. But I forgot one thing, a piece of sandpaper. This is for after we break the glass. Sometimes the edges are a little bit sharp, so we're going to basically sand off the edges there to make them safer to touch. So we'll come back and we'll start preparing the glass for ion exchange treatment. Alright, so let's take a look at the glass rods as they come to us to start with. So I've got two rulers here up next to the glass here. And so you can see that these glass rods come to us in roughly 2-foot segments. For the most part in the lab, we're going to be dealing with SI units, but we need to break these down for further testing because this is just too long for one glass rod. For both the mechanical testing, the 4-point bend testing that we're going to do, but also the ion exchange. We have to have smaller segments so that we don't have to have as much of the salt. So we are going to break these down into 7.5 centimeter lengths approximately, and so we're going to chop those down from these glass rods. But to start with, let's go ahead and just confirm what it says in the lab notebook for the diameter so that you know what that is. So using my calipers, you can see that I'm getting approximately 5 millimeters for the diameter. And so that's nominally what these glass rods will be, 5 millimeters. As we go on, we'll kind of do some checks for that as well. But the glass, as it comes to us, is approximately 2 feet in length and 5 millimeters in diameter. And like I said, we're going to chop it down into 7.5 centimeter portions, which will be used for the ion exchange treatments. Alright, so now we are going to measure the glass out in 7.5 centimeter increments so that we can do the scoring and cutting of the glass. So I tried to get as close as I could, but I know it's probably still a little fuzzy, but I'm on the centimeter sides up here. So basically I'm going to go up to 7.5, which is right there, and I'm going to mark off on the glass. And then I'm going to just slide down and keep marking off 7.5 on the glass. So you can see the red marks there and there. So if I keep doing this, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Get as close as you can to 7.5, but they don't have to be exact every single time, which is why we're just able to use a ruler. And then if I keep sliding down, I'm gonna see if I can go to the end of the rod here. And then if I get to my last one, I notice that my last one is about 9 centimeters. And so I'm going to go ahead and make one final mark to cut the glass off. So if you'll kind of notice here, and let me see if I can zoom out a little bit. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so each glass rod, if you work out the math there, should be able to hold 8 rods for one of these as received pieces. And so that's what we need to do. So if you kind of look at the numbers for this experiment, you'll probably be able to find out how many glass rods we had to cut. Alright, so now that we have this measured out, let's go ahead and do the scoring of the glass. And so to make this go a little easier and safer, I'm going to have my left hand, my non-dominant hand, I'm just going to wear the nitrile glove. But on my right hand, which is my dominant hand, I'm going to put the furnace glove on. Alright, so I've got my glass scoring tool here. Like I said, basically there is a wheel here that has a very sharp diamond tip in it, and so basically we're going to squeeze this onto the diameter of the glass or circumference of the glass, and then rotate the glass with my other hand so that we produce a score or a cut on the glass surface. And so that's going to be a guiding line that we're going to break the brittle glass along. So let me kind of show you how that's going to work. So I've got my glass rod, I've got my lines here, right? So I'm going to try to match the red marking as much as possible. And so I'm going to press down and make sure that that wheel is in contact with the red line. And then I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure, and then I'm going to use my other hand to rotate the glass. And so what you're looking for, and this will probably be difficult to see in the video here, but you're going to look for a little thin line that appears, and sometimes you might have to apply a little bit more force to make that happen. And you can also sometimes hear the glass kind of shattering a little bit. And so again, I don't know if this is going to be visible. I'll try to get it here. But you might notice that little white line here where the red is. So that's the glass. That's a little glass fracture caused by this wheel, this very sharp wheel. So it's called a scoring tool. You can do this on plain glass too. But the idea is that's where I want to break it so that I can get my 7.5 centimeter lengths. And so I'm putting a line there to focus the energy of the break. So I would just score one of these marks, and I want to try to get it all the way around the circumference, and then I am ready to move on to breaking the glass. Alright, so now we are moving on to the cutting or breaking of the glass. So now I'm going to go ahead and put both my sets of gloves on. Again, this is to protect my hands from the cut glass. So I've got that. I've got my pre-scored glass here, you can see. And then this is where the bag's going to come in handy. So when we break this glass, there's always a chance that little shards of glass come off and they're left on the table or on the floor down here. So what we're going to do is basically slot our glass rod into the bag, and I actually have a hole there that fits the rod. And so what I'm going to do is is I'm going to basically place this whole thing in the bag, and I'm going to zip it up. So basically everything that breaks is going to be contained inside the bag. All right, so next, again, it might be a little hard to see, but this is where my score line is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the glass rod. Let me readjust here for a second. All right, I'm going to take my glass rod and I'm going to position the score mark right here, right on the edge of the table. And I'm going to move this ruler out of the way because it's kind of in the way right now. All right. So my score line, the red, where that red is right on the edge of the table. And then I'm going to place my hand like this to hold the glass rod, the longer part of the glass rod. And then I'm going to take my other hand and basically lightly push down. And you might have heard that glass break, right? And so now you can see it's in two pieces. And the break happened within this plastic bag, so everything is nice and contained. All right, so let me open it up and show you our piece of glass, right? So now we've broken that, and so this is the broke surface of the glass, right? So that's our broken piece. And so we would continue to do that process with the rest of this glass rod until we have it all sectioned out into 7.5 centimeter pieces. All right, so we've got the cut piece of glass, and just to kind of show you that it's roughly 7.5 centimeters, there we go. Another thing you'll notice is this was the end of the glass rod, so it's rounded off, and so it's not going to pose a hazard to us. But the other side, this cut side, can be quite sharp, and a lot of times you get little edges that are extremely sharp. And so what we want to do as a final precaution for this glass is just kind of try to round off or get rid of any sharp edges on that cut side. And so we're just going to use a piece of sandpaper. This happens to be 400 grit. And so we're just using that to get rid of this. This is really for safety, because if we're handling these pieces of glass, we don't want to cut ourselves. So we've got that done. Right? It doesn't have to be perfectly flat or anything like that. We just want it to be safe to the touch. And so we just use that sandpaper, and then we would set that one aside, and that gives us one of our glass rods. And as you know, we need many for this process, and so we have to continue to do this with the glass rods as we go along to get this number. All right, so once we've processed all the glass, we've been storing them in this bag here. So this is a majority of the glass that we're going to use for this lab. So one of the things that we have done with this is that obviously each condition we need at least 30 glass rods, and then we have a given number of conditions and controls, so we know how many glass rods we need. But as you might imagine, this is a lot to count. And so one thing that we've learned is that I took the scale and took just one of our glass rods, so just any one of these glass rods, and I found that the weight is approximately 3.5 grams. And so then I'm able to extrapolate and weigh this bag to see the progress that we've made. And so once we get to that mass, then I know we can stop making more of these glass rods. So that's just kind of, I wanted you to kind of see the scale of the glass rods that we need for this lab.